The desert is silent. The wind carries only dust and the cry of distant birds. In the stillness, an old man walks beside his son. The boy's laughter fills the air, innocent, pure, unaware of the burden his father carries in his heart. The man's name is Abraham, and on this journey, he is not simply walking to a mountain. He is walking into history. For centuries, men have raised altars of stone to their gods. Sacrifices of grain, oil, and animals were common. But what Abraham was asked to do was unthinkable. The voice of the Almighty had spoken, "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, and offer him as a sacrifice." This was not just a command, it was the ultimate test. Abraham was promised descendants as countless as the stars, yet now he was told to surrender the very child through whom that promise would come. The weight of that contradiction crushed him, but still, he obeyed. With every step, the desert seemed heavier. The boy carried the wood, asking innocently, "Father, where is the lamb?" Abraham's heart trembled, but his answer carried eternal meaning: God himself will provide. This is not just the story of one man and his son. It is the story that shaped three of the world's greatest faiths. It is the moment when obedience outweighed fear, when surrender became strength, and when faith changed the destiny of nations. Stay with us, because this journey is not just ancient history, it's a living reminder of what it means to trust, even when the cost is everything. And if stories of faith and destiny inspire you, make sure you subscribe so you never miss the next journey into the past. Abraham's journey did not begin on the mountain, it began with a voice. A voice that cut through the noise of the world, a voice that called him out of comfort and into destiny. Long before this test, Abraham had already heard God's call: "Leave your homeland, your father's house, and go to the land I will show you." He left behind the idols of Ur, the wealth of his family, and the security of the familiar, walking into the unknown. That call transformed him from Abram the wanderer into Abraham, the father of nations. But now, years later, another call came, one more difficult, more piercing, more impossible to understand. God did not ask Abraham for wealth, for lands, or for victory in battle. He asked for his heart. He asked for his son. This was not just any child. This was the miracle child, the boy born when Abraham was nearly 100 years old, the living proof of God's promise. Isaac was laughter, joy, and hope wrapped into one. Yet the voice of God demanded, "Offer him as a sacrifice." Why such a command? To test whether Abraham loved the gift more than the giver, the promise more than the promiser. Faith is not proven when everything is easy. Faith is proven when everything is at stake. And so, Abraham rose early in the morning. Notice the detail: he did not delay, he did not argue. He saddled his donkey, split the wood, and set out with his son and 2 servants. Every strike of the axe, every step of the journey was an echo of obedience. This call was not just about Abraham, it was about all who would follow in the path of faith. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all look back to this moment as the defining test of surrender. For the Jewish tradition, it is the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, a story retold in prayers and liturgy. For Christians, it foreshadows the sacrifice of Christ, the Son who carried the wood of his own cross. For Muslims, it is remembered on Eid al-Adha, the festival of sacrifice, when believers honor Abraham's submission and God's mercy. One call, one command, one test, and yet its echo has shaped billions of lives across thousands of years. The call of God teaches us something timeless, that faith begins not with answers, but with obedience. That sometimes the path forward begins with letting go. That to trust God fully means holding nothing back, not even what we love most. It was this call that set Abraham on the road to the mountain, the road that would end with a knife raised in trembling hands, and with history forever changed. The call had been given. The command was clear. And so Abraham began the most difficult journey of his life. The scriptures tell us he rose early in the morning. Imagine the silence of that dawn, the fire being kindled, the donkey being saddled, the wood being split. Every movement heavy with meaning. every sound a reminder of the test that lay ahead. He did not hesitate, he did not protest, but neither did he rush. He walked in obedience, step by painful step. The journey to the mountain took 3 days. 3 days of silence, 3 days of tension. Beside him, his son walked innocently, carrying the very wood upon which he might be laid. Behind them, 2 servants followed, unaware of the storm within their master's heart. 3 days may sound simple, but in those days Abraham wrestled with the deepest conflict a father could face. The voice of God called him to surrender, the voice of love clung to the child beside him. Each night beneath the stars, Abraham must have remembered the promise, descendants as countless as the heavens. And yet each morning, he rose again and walked. On the 3rd day, the mountain came into view, Mount Moriah. Abraham turned to his servants and said, "Stay here with the donkey. The boy and I will go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you." Did you hear that? We will come back to you. These words reveal a secret hidden in Abraham's heart, faith. He did not know how God would provide. He did not know what miracle might come. But he believed that somehow, some way, both he and his son would return. Hebrews later explains that Abraham believed God could even raise the dead. As father and son climbed the mountain alone, the boy asked the question that pierced the silence, "Father, the fire and wood are here, but where is the lamb for the sacrifice?" How could Abraham answer? His voice must have trembled, yet his words carried eternal weight, "God himself will provide the lamb." This was not a clever evasion. It was a declaration of faith. Abraham trusted not in explanations, but in God's character. He knew that the same God who gave life to a barren womb could make a way where none seemed possible. The journey of obedience is never easy. It is often filled with silence, with unanswered questions, with steps that feel heavier than we can bear. But Abraham's walk up that mountain teaches us that faith is not about understanding every detail, it is about trusting the one who calls. 3 days, 1 mountain, 1 father, 1 son. And still Abraham walked, step by step, higher and higher, into the very heart of faith. The journey had ended. The mountain stood silent, the air heavy with tension. Abraham and his son reached the summit, and there, the old patriarch began to build an altar of stone. Each rock he placed was like a weight on his heart, each movement another reminder of what was about to happen. The firewood was arranged. The fire was ready. But where was the lamb? Finally, the moment could not be delayed. With trembling hands, Abraham told his son the truth of God's command. We are not told every detail of that conversation, but what we do know is powerful. The boy did not resist. Whether out of youthful trust in his father or faith of his own, he allowed himself to be bound and placed upon the altar. The image is almost too much to bear, a father tying the wrists of his own child, a son looking upward in innocence and surrender. This was the knife's edge of faith. Abraham lifted his hand, and in that raised blade, all of history seemed to pause. This was the son he had waited decades for. This was the promise made flesh. To sacrifice him felt like sacrificing the future itself. Yet Abraham's hand did not waver. His heart screamed, but his obedience was firm. Here is the essence of faith, not when the path is easy, but when the cost is unbearable. True surrender is not measured by what we say, but by what we are willing to give up. And in this moment, Abraham proved that he trusted God even when it meant letting go of everything. The silence of heaven must have been deafening. Angels watched. Creation held its breath. Would the Father of nations truly give up his son? Then, suddenly, a voice broke the silence. The angel of the Lord cried out, "Abraham, Abraham! Do not lay a hand on the boy. Do not harm him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." The knife fell, not on the child, but to the ground. The test was complete. Abraham had surrendered everything, and in that surrender, he had gained everything. This moment of surrender has echoed for thousands of years. For Jews, it is remembered as the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, a symbol of ultimate obedience. For Christians, it foreshadows the sacrifice of another son, one who would not be spared. For Muslims, it is honored on Eid al-Adha, when millions remember Abraham's submission and God's mercy. The altar on Mount Moriah became more than a pile of stones. It became a monument to surrender, a reminder that faith is not about what we keep, but about what we are willing to give up. Abraham's raised knife was not the end of hope, it was the beginning of it. The blade hovered in the air. Abraham's breath was heavy, his hand shaking but steady. The boy lay still upon the wood, his eyes lifted toward the heavens. It was the climax of surrender, the moment when time itself seemed to freeze. And then, heaven broke its silence. A voice thundered across the mountain, "Abraham! Abraham!" Twice his name was called, urgent and clear. Abraham stopped mid-motion, the knife frozen in his hand. "Here I am," he answered, his heart pounding. The voice continued, "Do not lay a hand on the boy. Do not harm him. For now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." At that instant, relief must have washed over Abraham like a flood. His trembling hands lowered the blade, tears blurring his vision. His son was alive, spared not by chance, but by divine mercy. The test was complete, not by death, but by faith. And then Abraham lifted his eyes. There, caught in a thicket by its horns, was a ram. It had not been there before, but now it stood ready, the substitute sacrifice provided by God himself. Abraham quickly untied his son, and together they offered the ram upon the altar. The smell of burning sacrifice rose into the air, not as a cry of loss, but as a song of thanksgiving. This moment defined the nature of God. Unlike the pagan deities of the ancient world who demanded human blood, the God of Abraham revealed himself as the one who provides. Not a God of cruelty, but of compassion. Not a God who takes life, but one who gives it. Abraham named that place Yahweh Yire, the Lord will provide. But the divine intervention went beyond sparing a boy. It was a declaration for all generations: obedience does not end in despair, and faith never walks alone. God does not test to destroy, he tests to reveal, to strengthen, to prepare. For Christians, the ram foreshadows another sacrifice, Jesus, the Lamb of God, who would one day take the place of humanity. For Muslims, this is why Eid al-Adha is celebrated, to honor Abraham's submission and God's mercy, with the sacrifice of animals symbolizing provision and obedience. For Jews, it remains the Akedah, a story recited in prayers to remind them of Abraham's devotion and God's faithfulness. The mountain that might have become a place of sorrow became instead a place of revelation. The story that might have ended in tragedy became one of the greatest testaments to faith and mercy in all of history. On Mount Moriah, Abraham discovered that God does not simply demand, he also provides. And that truth became the foundation of faith for billions. The story of Abraham and his son did not end on Mount Moriah. The echoes of that moment have traveled through time, shaping faith, inspiring nations, and reminding humanity of what it truly means to trust. When Abraham lifted the knife, he was one man on one mountain. But when he lowered it, he became the father of faith for billions. His surrender became a legacy, not just for his son, but for every generation that would come after. For the Jewish people, the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, became central to prayer and memory. It is retold during the high holy days, a reminder of Abraham's obedience and God's mercy. In moments of struggle, Jews looked back to Abraham and drew courage from his example, believing that faith could overcome even the darkest trials. For Christians, this story is a shadow of something greater. The image of a beloved son carrying the wood of his own sacrifice pointed forward to Christ, who would carry the cross. Where Isaac was spared, Jesus was not. Where a ram was provided, the Lamb of God became the ultimate substitute. The test of Abraham became the prophecy of salvation. For Muslims, the story lives at the heart of Eid al-Adha, the festival of sacrifice. Every year, millions remember Abraham's submission to God's will and the mercy shown through divine provision. Families sacrifice an animal not to mourn, but to celebrate obedience, faith, and generosity, sharing meat with the poor as a symbol of compassion. But beyond religion, the story carries universal meaning. It speaks to parents who face the pain of letting go, to leaders who must put duty above comfort, to every human being who has stood at the edge of surrender and had to decide, will I trust? The legacy of Abraham's test is this: that faith is not passive. It is not mere belief, it is action, obedience, trust when nothing makes sense. It is the willingness to hold nothing back, even when it costs everything. And in that surrender, humanity discovered something profound, that God is not a destroyer, but a provider. Look around the world today, and you will still see the impact of this story. In synagogues, churches, and mosques, people tell and retell it. In prayers, songs, and rituals, it continues to live. It is not just history, it is a living legacy of what it means to walk with God. And perhaps the greatest lesson is this: Abraham was not perfect. He doubted, he struggled, he questioned. But when the ultimate test came, he trusted. And that trust has lit a path for billions to follow. From one man on one mountain came a legacy of faith that still changes the world. So what does Abraham's ultimate test teach us today? That true faith is not proven in comfort, but in sacrifice. That trust is not shown when life is easy, but when everything is on the line. Abraham was asked to give up what he loved most, and in surrender, he discovered that God provides. This is not just an ancient story. It is a living reminder that obedience can change history, that trust can unlock provision, and that faith, real, raw, costly faith, is stronger than fear. Three great faiths still draw strength from this moment. Jews remember the Akedah as a symbol of devotion. Christians see in it the foreshadowing of a greater sacrifice. Muslims honor it every year at Eid al-Adha as a celebration of submission and mercy. Billions of people, across thousands of years, still find hope in one man's obedience. And now, you and I stand in the echo of that story. The question is not what Abraham did. It's what we will do when our test comes. If this story moved you, imagine the other journeys of faith still waiting to be told. Make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, and share this video with someone who needs hope. Because here, history isn't just retold, it comes alive.